Recording with Mr. Joe Allen on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023 at 3:24 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, you may be wondering, Tommy, how come this show didn't start at 2 p.m. Eastern? Why is it 3:24? Well, because I'm an idiot and I threw my keys out into the trash. I don't know why. I have no idea what was going through my mind when maybe they fell. I have no idea. I had to get the front desk to unlock the door for me I'm an idiot. Mr. Allen has the patience of a saint. I always say that, but that's not, I don't really say that to people when I'm 5 minutes late. I'm an hour and 24 minutes late. So for that reason alone, please go buy the fucking book, because this guy has already shown me patience that he shouldn't show me, which is a wonderful trait. But real quick, man, while I post the live link, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Joe Allen, Transhumanism editor for The War Room, author of the new book, Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. And if your audience, Tommy, I've gone back and listened to some of your shows, and I saw you had Dr. Malone on. You guys touched, actually, you focused on transhumanism. So I assume the audience is fairly familiar with the topic. So we can dive as deep on any angle as you'd like. The book itself has really three elements that are really important. The first being the technology itself, whether it be artificial intelligence, robotics, brain-computer interfaces, genetic engineering. Those are really the categories that I'm focusing on, primarily because those are the types of technologies that transhumanists are by and large obsessed with. The second element is the belief system underpinning these technologies, the transhumanist movement in general, the other movements that maybe perhaps wouldn't call themselves transhumanist, but certainly they align with the goals of, say, creating superhuman artificial intelligence, or perhaps attaching one's brain to that intelligence, or perhaps to strengthen the human genomic strain. The third element is just the how do you approach a world in which these technologies exist, and maybe more importantly, how do you approach a world where people hold up technology as the highest power in the universe, where technology has become the focal point of what I would without any reservation argue is a new religious system. What do you do when your neighbors have succumbed, but maybe more importantly and probably realistically, what do you do when the most powerful corporations, militaries, and governments on Earth have begun to be suffused with techno-religion, with transhumanism, perhaps even the kind of post-human strain? And what happens when these ideas become, say, as prevalent as Islam did in North Africa in the 7th century? These are the questions I'm grappling with from a human angle. What do we do? I don't spend a lot of time on direct prescriptions. Here's how to live your life. I do hope, though, that I provide a few tools to approach this new world, this brave new world.
So, for people that don't know, I was a weird kid. So in high school, when people were at something called the prom, I was reading "The Singularity Is Near" by Ray Kurzweil, and I got really obsessed with. For everybody listening, I'll watch the timer so I don't end up running my mouth for 10 minutes like an idiot. It's the exponential increase in technology. It's like interest on a bank. You start here, and by the end of your life, you're making $1 million a week off of deposits you made 80 years ago. That's exponential increase. Ray Kurzweil shows through truly from us standing up straight, using our thumbs and planting food instead of hunting, to the wheel, to the knife, to fire, to Boeing 737s. It's going faster and faster and faster. You look at someone from 500 AD to 800 AD, a dad and their dad and their dad's dad and their dad. They're all probably doing about the same thing. Versus now, when my dad was my age, there were no cell phones, right? There's almost no internet. Versus where I am, and then when my dad's dad was his age, it was like 10 years after World War II, right? The hippies were moving. Kennedy was running for office. They're almost unrecognizable, and it's going faster and faster and faster. And what that shows is once you get to a certain point, it's going to be moving so fast that we can't accurately visualize what it looks like. Right now, you and I can probably imagine what the next iPhone looks like, right? You look out 5 years, probably like, yeah, I imagine all cars are probably going to go electric. Okay, you can do that. But now look at the difference between the Model T and a Tesla Cybertruck. Now I would ask the listener, so that's 120 years. What do you think cars are going to look like in 120 years from now? You kind of, it gets fuzzy, right? It gets staticky. We'll hit a point where the technology is going so fast that eventually we'll create an artificial intelligence that, even if it's not superhuman, if it's just as smart as a human, you could duplicate a billion of those. They don't need sleep, and you could have them working on problems, or even you could have them working on how to make smarter versions of themselves. And that's called bootstrapping. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And then it will become insanely smart, and you really can't see past that. Ray Kurzweil talks about how to get there, how to survive to that point. He thinks the singularity is around 2045. Now, he's an older guy, so his whole book is kind of about how to extend his life. The first thing is like bridge one is like supplementation, how to, take supplements and live longer, exercise, caloric restriction. I think his second bridge is like genomic engineering, how to, get therapies and like biotech implants. And then the third for him is like the holy grail. It's nanotechnology. It goes in and fixes your body as it decays. And then he kind of postulates a fourth bridge, and that's where you merge with machines. So that's just for everybody. I know you know all of that, but for everybody listening, that's kind of the idea of what we're coming up on. And whether it's 2045 or 2085, I think the idea is that it's going to happen. So with that kind of ramble out of the way, there's a point I want to make, and it's what I think it was what Alan Watts said, the philosopher. The first question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to commit suicide or not? Because if the answer is yes, then no philosophy matters. If the answer is no, well, then you got to start deciding what you're going to do with your life. So for me, I kind of look at the coming singularity, and it's very much Truman-esque. When he was briefed on the idea of the hydrogen bomb, they said it's evil. It's 1,000 times stronger than the A bomb. He asked, can the Soviets do it? They said, yeah, probably within a couple of years. He said, well, then we have no choice. We have to get to it. And so that's kind of where I look at what's coming. So we have to ask ourselves, is it going to happen? Well, it's probably going to happen. So there is no idea of, well, I'm going to go back to the land and go live in a log cabin. You could, but your peers around you are going to theoretically merge with machines and, relative to you, become gods. So, and I don't like that answer. I wish the answer was you could just avoid it, but I don't think we can. So we can't stop the coming flood. Let's start building a boat. How are we going to navigate this world? So what are your thoughts on that? Is there navigation? Is there outright resistance? Or is this just the end of Homo sapiens as we know it? And are we almost entering a new species? I know that was a 5-minute babble, but had to get that all out.
Everything you're talking about is based in evolution for the most part. There are maybe religious and philosophical arguments for it that incorporate something supernatural. But if we live in a world of atoms in the void, if it is nothing but material, then the evolutionary argument, I would say, is the strongest possible argument for the development of species, for the form that we take as human beings. And as I go into in the book in depth, the idea of transhumanism is based on 3 layers of evolution. You have biological evolution, the 3.5 billion-year process of life coming to be on Earth. Then you have cultural evolution. You could trace it back, say, 2 million plus years, looking at Homo erectus, or you could just say that maybe when culture came to full maturity with the hunter-gatherers some 40,000 years ago, whatever. It's a tiny, tiny snippet of time in comparison to biological evolution. One thing is for certain, whether one is an evolutionist or even a fundamentalist Christian, that the cultural evolution is extraordinarily rapid. We went either from the Garden of Eden and Cain to cities, and then industrial cities, and then now a fully digitized global civilization, or maybe you would say an array of civilizations. So that cultural evolution is the next sort of item in the transhumanist mythos. That it is far, far faster than biological, and in many ways feeds back into the biological, even
Mm,
changing the genome by way of who gets to have children, for instance, or who gets killed off in any given culture. And then from there, you have digital Darwinism. You have the idea that electronic systems, algorithms, that robots, even synthetic biological organisms, that these entities are in fact some form of life. That, Max Tegmark, the MIT physicist, makes this argument. You could think of it as an analogy. Many think of it quite literally, but one way or another, the digital development of new entities, new intelligences, I would say that digital evolution is outstripping the cultural evolution. So you have the biological evolution, kind of in the same sort of
yeah.
exponential increase you're describing with Ray Kurzweil's paradigm, biological evolution giving way to rapid increases in cultural evolution, and then even more rapid increases in digital evolution. Corresponding to each of those, you have biological eugenics, you have cultural eugenics, and you have digital eugenics. The idea that human beings are going to actually accelerate the process by taking out negative leftover elements from evolution, negative leftover elements from cultures that are now obsolete, and then of course producing, you just mentioned, you can take artificial intelligence and replicate it, not infinitely, but far faster than you can biological organisms, and test them. The idea of evolutionary algorithms works on that principle, and just the general process of creating software works on that. You create a number of different products, and then they are selected for. So that's all to say that the question you'd ask, and kind of the point you brought up, if we are entering the singularity, how do you respond? And if we are entering the singularity, and if these technologies are viable, then undoubtedly those who incorporate them in some fashion or another are going to outpace their neighbors evolutionarily. They're going to be the ones who dominate the culture. Those nations that adopt them will be the ones who dominate global politics. And then, of course, over the course of generations, those who successfully incorporated them will be they'll be the heirs to the earth. First question: is the singularity near? I think that Ray Kurzweil was very accurate in many of his assessments, but the farther away he gets from the present day, the more implausible the scenarios he presents. And I've seen the claim many times he's 86% correct on all his predictions. I've never once seen a breakdown of them, and you can find different timelines with a few of his hottest takes. But if you read his previous book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, published in 1999, he makes a lot of claims that came to pass, and I think that should be taken very seriously. He made some claims that are coming to pass, maybe not on his timeline, also needs to be taken seriously. But he made, say, carbon nanotubes as the primary
Mhm.
processor. That was completely inaccurate, and a number of other predictions that he's made. Maybe they will come to pass, but it hasn't happened anything like his timeline. So
Yeah.
many people take Kurzweil's gospel. I definitely don't. I think he's someone to be taken very, very seriously, though. And then the second question, though, if your neighbors are doing it, do you do it in order to keep up with the Joneses, technologically speaking? I don't think that's necessary. There are a number of ways to gauge whether or not a person is successful, or a family, or a community, or a city, or a nation. And I don't necessarily think that GDP or the number of square miles one controls with one's military, that these measures are necessarily the correct measures for what's truly good or successful about a culture or a
Sure.
society. The question remains, though, one thing I don't think can be denied is when technologies do work effectively, and many of these technologies do, they do confer an advantage. So even if I may differ, and I don't know that I do, but let's just say that even if I don't necessarily subscribe 100% to the transhumanist paradigm and the premises that they begin with, I think they need to be taken very seriously. But I also believe that even if one rejects them, you better have a very good plan.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you in terms of like what is success. No, I'm with you 1,000%. Success isn't how big your empire is. I mean, there are empires that I've never heard of. We all know Roman, Ottoman. Every once in a while, you'll find like an empire you've never even heard the name of. And like, how valuable is that if it's not even present in your mind 2,000 years later? I think, I think it's actually quite simple. I think meaningful relationships, loving your family, you get something out of giving back to your community. These are all deep, rich things that are really attainable by most people. You don't need to be, happiness isn't being 6'8" and winning an NBA championship. Like happiness can be like you're a respected member of your community. I'm with you on that 1,000%. However, there's also the very real aspect of, we can say we're happy and, we don't need whatever Germany's doing over there. It's 1940. I mean, they're all on meth and they think, happiness is about advancing, but we're happy in our little cottages. Well, that's all well and good, but if they're developing rockets and they're going to start bombing London, it doesn't matter if we're happy. Well, they find happiness in a bigger empire and they're bombing us from over the horizon. So there's a very real thing. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all, but there's a very real thing, right? You can help people out all the time. Some people just take advantage. You can help a friend out and it's great and you feel great. You can help someone else out and they stab you in the back. And there is a certain moment where, you can ask God for guidance, the universe, whatever, whatever you want. There is a certain moment where you just have to look at reality and you go, I want to help this person out, but they're bad. That technology, nuclear technology just is. It doesn't care who discovers it. So luckily, Leo Szilard and Einstein and all of them left Germany and came to the United States. Thank God. Thank God those special forces went and blew up the heavy water plant in, was it Norway, Norsk Hydro? Thank God they did a suicide mission, but it put the Nazis back. So I don't really look at it as, and I get what you're saying, keeping up with the Joneses. I don't mean it in oh well, they got a Tesla. I need a Tesla too. This podcast is not sponsored by Tesla, but like I got to get that too, right? No, I get that whole idea. I'm not looking at it so much as that because you can look at it and go, yeah, who cares? What, you see someone on Instagram, they're in Bali. Yeah, but you know what? I'm happy in New England. My family's nearby. I don't mean that. I mean the Nazis are developing rockets. Well, you know what? Let them go after. And it's like, no, dude, we need rockets because they're going to start bombing us to smithereens. That's my concern. Is getting into transhumanism. Who is getting into it? Who's going to be at the reins of it? Is it going to be some crazy blue-haired lady you see screaming in the street saying that you're evil because you're a white straight male? Right now we see her and we go, what a bitch. You make a joke about her. But what happens when she dials into transhumanism? What happens when she's super powerful? Or when she has replications of herself or an army of nanobots where she's made of tungsten and silicon? Now all of a sudden that crazy person who, if they could, would kill you is no longer a meme you see on Reddit, is an actual threat. So that's kind of my thoughts on it is I don't think we can keep whatever we feel is peaceful and happy and God-fearing and patriotic and loving and all that good stuff because the other people who don't want that might become infinitely more powerful than you. And that's kind of my fear of it is I think we have to tap into it. I think you have to join it in order to fight it. No one's fighting, in the civil or in the World War I, you had a lot of generals who they're like the cavalry will save us. And it's like, dude, horses are a thing of the past. Within the first battle, like Maxim machine guns were just mowing down horses. And it's like, dude, that's over now. I know you have a romantic idea of when you were a young soldier, you were on horses, but that's over now. The British got these fucking thing called tanks. Like it doesn't matter. The reality is indifferent and it's cold. I think if we don't join it or use it to our own ends, someone else is going to do it to us. And that's a sad statement. I don't like it. That doesn't seem fuzzy and warm. But I think I would be very idyllic and romantic if I tried to ignore history, even the last 100 years. Sorry, I know I was ranting. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
This is the central argument that's made by not only transhumanists, but just kind of tech oligarchs in general. they oftentimes point to China. They say, what happens if China gets ahead of us?
Precisely.
Russia has also been a target of that. And also, what happens if a smaller nation does? What happens if rogue actors get a hold of an AI that could
Or
pervade an
or
entire digital
corporation.
system and wreak havoc? So one of probably the most common names in this is Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google. Eric Schmidt famously said, if you don't like mass surveillance, maybe you should be thinking about. And I'm paraphrasing. Maybe you should just be questioning what you're doing online. Kind of a threatening and dismissive attitude towards the complete stripping of privacy from American life by way of digital technology. Well, after his time at Google, he's now working hand in glove with the Department of Defense, and he is doing his best to, as he puts it, bring the United States military into the 21st century. One of the talking points he uses very frequently is, if we don't, China will. He chaired the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. They put out the report in 2021, 2 years ago. It's a very dense report. There's a lot in there, but one key element that I highlighted in an article at the time was that very argument in regards to lethal autonomous weapons. So that drone swarms, for instance, or even just a missile system, a gun turret, whatever, a robotic soldier. And by a robotic soldier, I don't necessarily mean a humanoid soldier. It could literally be look like a little Tonka truck with a small explosive attached to it. So the argument is that if you have advanced algorithms that can detect threats faster than a human, and if you have advanced algorithms that can respond to that threat with lethal force faster than a human, any military employing that will rapidly overtake a human-controlled military system. And beginning with his premise that China will kind of inevitably take over if we don't do it, and also the idea that one can model reality before it actually unfolds accurately, so that you've modeled this future AI, this algorithmic war machine, and your model actually is as accurate as you thought it would be, and so you make all the decisions based on it. Assuming those premises, yeah, sure, we live in a world of competing superorganisms that are held together by digital glue, and that we are basically cells in those superorganisms, and the strongest superorganism may not destroy all the others, but will certainly call most of the shots. There is definitely truth to that, but looking at a lot of these military technologies on the ground, it's very frequent for soldiers who are paired. For instance, you'll notice that you don't see a whole lot in the news about the robotic donkeys, basically the robotic mules
Boston
that were
Dynamics.
so that had so much attention. I'm sorry.
Is that Boston Dynamics?
I don't think that they produce them. No, Boston Dynamics has been pretty clear on not wanting to allow the military to use their technologies. But DARPA and various the Department of Defense itself, and then various contractors are producing robots that are not as good as Boston Dynamics, but similar. So
But
it is. You could think of it as like Spot as a mule. But
okay.
either way, so soldiers were just constantly like, yeah, this thing is. We spend more time trying to maintain this thing and get it to
Mm,
stop doing all the stupid shit that it's doing, than we would just saving that time and energy having it lug our stuff around. We'd rather just carry
yeah.
our own sacks. So, and that's one of many instances. Drone technology was supposed to be super accurate, not only in targeting but also in striking. So when the drone technology rolled out, really in Obama's first term is when it really came into its own. It was good, very good at being able to kill enemies, but mostly the left covered this, but there were a lot of civilians killed because they were targeted by mistake, and there were a lot of drones wasted because they malfunctioned. But probably the most important point there is that the targeting itself of the individual who was supposed to be the threat, the famous cases were like weddings, things like that, with children and women. So I think that there's every reason to question whether or not these models of the future in which these technologies are intimately integrated into the military, into a corporate structure, and into the day-to-day operations of a corporation, especially into education. The robot instructed student is going to be superior when he graduates than the organically instructed student or the hybrid, whatever model you're going with. The truth is we simply don't know what's going to happen. And so this is very much an experiment. And to the extent that the corporations and military organizations and medical organizations and various other agencies and actors are honest and in their assessment of what the effect of these technologies are, some 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, perhaps we'll have some sense based on scientific inquiry, where are we now? What has happened? How much of that was actually accurate? Until then, it's an experiment, much like the mRNA-based vaccines.
Hmm.
And as we saw, the rapid incorporation of that into the cultural structure was a disaster. The smartphone was also a disaster, in my opinion. And I would say the internet, by and large, has been disastrous in so many different elements of human life. The automobile has had tremendous downsides in places where it's not regulated down, and LA, for instance, where the entire city, if aliens came, they would wonder why these machines needed humans to power them, because that's obviously the dominant creature on the planet. All of these different technologies have had tremendous downsides, especially when deployed and used unwisely. And so the sort of fervor that transhumanists feel, and then kind of working out from there, the futurists and the technocrats and just the average citizen, I think that there's a good reason to take them seriously, every reason to question it. And if it doesn't fit your aesthetic model, they'll say your military is full of cyborgs, but you don't want your children to be, because they're going to be a pianist or they're going to be a plumber. Then I think there's every reason to reject these technologies and remain part of the control group. And let's see what happens. Let's see who really does win out in this supposed evolutionary struggle.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, you don't need to. You don't need to convince me. You're preaching to the choir. I'm just gonna be Tommy. But okay, the internet. Let's say it's disastrous, right? Let's say cars are disastrous, smartphones are disastrous. Okay, but they're still here. They're not going anywhere. I mean, I got an iPhone. My first phone was like a Nokia flip phone. I think I had a Razor, and then iPhones, and now I'm on this generation. We all look at it and we go, social media is cancer. It's not slowing down. No part
Well, I
of
would
it's
say,
slowing down.
real quickly,
Yeah.
OxyContin's here too. Heroin's here.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Assisted suicides here. Sex
Oh yeah.
bots are here.
Oh yeah.
Fleshlights are here.
Yeah. No.
A
Yeah.
lot of people will use them. Many will use them, many will not, and many will use them sparingly, wisely. Many will not. That's
No,
the key. I don't mean to be an absolutist when I say that. I don't mean go back to the caves,
yeah.
but I definitely mean we need to take stock of the last 250 years and figure out where we've gone wrong and project that forward. Where could we go very, very wrong in the future?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, no, I mean fentanyl, oxycontin, opioids, they're abundant and I don't touch them. I've never used a flashlight, I can say proudly, right? But you're right. No, that's a very fair counterpoint. There are things here that some of us look at and go, nah, not for me, right? I could, it would be completely socially acceptable by force for me to go chop off my cock and balls, have a faux vagina put in, get fake tits, and then, I don't know, dye my hair neon green and say I'm a neo-Leninist Marxist foxkin. And people would smile and say, that's stunning and brave. But I don't, right? I don't. I got, apparently, I'm evil. I'm a white guy. I got blue eyes with an American flag behind me, right? I get it. I'm Hitler. No, that's a fair point that those things aren't. But you could also say, you know, the internet hasn't been disastrous. Okay, but you and I are talking right now, right? We
Yes.
in a way we're co-opting it, right? I got banned from YouTube for talking about things that are now accepted, right? Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough, those all got me iced. But I'm on Rumble now and I'm not stopping, mostly out of a white hot hatred for YouTube and censorship and all things Marxist. But I could sit down and say, well, it's all evil, not do anything about it. Or I had a friend the other night. I was like, dude, I don't know when my podcast is going to succeed, man. I'm not making any money. I just want it to work. This guy he goes, what do you mean, Tommy? You've put a significant dent in Pfizer's bottom line. He goes, that is successful. And I was like, hey, there's something for that. There's something for that. And, but that's kind of co-opting it. But I want to go back to your, the idea of their projections. They are wildly incorrect. I mean, I haven't read Singularity is Near since I think 2008, Yeah, but Kurzweil was saying by 2020, like laptops are going to be smarter than the human brain. We're not.
2030, yeah,
Oh,
2030, by 2030, we will have emulated the human brain completely. Which,
yeah.
one thing he really got wrong on that was just the actual mechanism that is used in artificial intelligence. At the time he wrote it, it was still seemed pretty plausible that you could have some kind of neuromorphic system that looked not look but functioned much more like a brain than what we have now. Like an artificial neural network is very much analogous to the brain. It's
Hmm.
in no way an emulated brain. And that was like one big one, right? So by 2030, 7 years from now, that's going to be the thing. What may actually happen, though, I mean, let's just say you take Elon Musk seriously. What would then happen if his loose timeline is correct? Is that by 2030, one of these neural networks will have done something sort of like that? You will end up with human level or superhuman level artificial general intelligence. And if that happens, kind of like you had mentioned before, if you have something that's not even that superhuman, which is going to be unlikely given how powerful the systems that work, if you end up with something that's just human level, it is actually de facto superhuman, just because of as you say, it never has to sleep. It can go over as much data as you can feed it. Its processing is lightning fast. All these different advantages, I will say, Tommy, I do take that argument very seriously, and especially if you look at one thing that really shook me out of my complacency. I've been reading transhumanists for 24 years, probably 25 years. And, up until really around 2016, I still kind of shrugged it off. I just didn't think, I thought it really seemed like a pipe dream, because I think by and large technologies don't end up being as beneficial as they've been promised. But then you had AlphaGo and then
Mm,
AlphaZero after that.
yeah.
And even though I'm not a Go player, so it's not like anything personal, and
Yeah.
I'm not a very good chess player, so I'm, whatever. But Alpha Go was always this thing. I can remember in the early 2000s, it was like, or really even the late 90s, when Gary Kasparov was beaten by, was the Deep Blue,
Yeah.
and in chess. And after that, chess is, now computerized chess is basically just an iron wall. You can never get past it. But everybody was always like, well, Go is different. Go is very intuitive. It's much more complex. It requires many times playing it to get just an instinctive sense of what's going on, so that the rational decisions are, built on top of all these subconscious calculations. So a computer will never replicate that. And then AlphaGo, they trained it on all these successful moves and unsuccessful moves. They gave it the rules of the game, obviously. And then after training on all those moves, it beat, what was the guy's name? Lee Sedol, the South Korean Go master. And then it kept improving. And then they developed AlphaZero. And
Hmm.
unlike AlphaGo, which trained on previous moves, so you could at least say, okay, well, it required human inspiration or human content to do what it did. With AlphaZero, and it applied to chess, it applied to Go, at various other games that they taught it. What they gave it was just the rules of the game, just the bare bones
Yeah.
rules of the game, and had it play itself. It's what's known as I'll come back to me in just a second. I'm on a different train. I keep wanting to say
Like a scrimmage.
adversarial. Sorry, it's an adversarial network in which two systems are basically, or multiple systems are working against each other to arrive at something superior. So it's playing itself over and over and over and over again, millions of times. It's generating,
Just
it's creating all these moves itself. And what came out the other end again was a superhuman Go player that had taught itself all its own moves. Many of them, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, resemble previous Go Masters moves. Many of them were simply creative. It came up with it all on its lonesome, and that is very serious when you bring that up to the level of, say, battlefield simulation, where you have, all the locations of your enemies' positions, and the equipment they have, number of soldiers, their supply lines, all of that, and you're able to model it much more accurately than they're able to model yours. It's a tremendous advantage, and you see that already in Ukraine with Palantir. Palantir is given their
hmm
software to Ukraine. On the one hand, they say it's for humanitarian and principled reasons, but they also openly say, CEO Alex Karp openly says it's also a way to experiment with these technologies, so that we can see what works and what doesn't, should the U.S. get into a similar conflict with one of these superpowers. All that's to say that, yeah, if it didn't work, it would just be a pipe dream. And if it didn't have benefits, it really wouldn't matter. Now that we know that some of these technologies, including genetic engineering, do have certain benefits, the question going forward will be, how do you discern in an experimental environment which possible benefits are worth risking trying any of these, incorporating them into the society or into your life? And then from there, even if it's pretty much proven that it's beneficial, but yet you do give up something of either your own free will or your own abilities, your own techniques. If that happens, is it worth it? And that's the real question, I think, in both cases. Is it worth it?
Yeah, I think yeah, I've thought that since the beginning. I think that we're using Ukraine as some sort of, instead of the Nevada test site, the biggest, military installation in the world, which is Area 51 is inside that. I think we're just using Ukraine. It's real time. You have actual humans running around with brains trying to survive. I mean, it's a dark, evil, psychopathic way to look at it, but it's an invaluable. Every war is, right. Let's see how this happens, and it is kind of in terms of like cultural evolution, right? We finally get out of the Middle East, right? The withdrawal was obviously hellish. Not making light of the Marines that I interviewed one of the guys that was at Kabul Air Base while he was there. I don't even know if that was legal, but I did that. But there was a general feeling of like, we got out. It's not good. We could have pulled the band-aid off in a much better way, in a much more humane way. We didn't, but ultimately we got out. And then we're immediately back in war. But not that we know of, no US boots on the ground. I mean, I would imagine Delta and DevGru are probably fucking around in there. Why wouldn't they? But overall, there's not, we're not sending the Marines over. There's and we retweet memes. We go, they have 100 billion for Ukraine, but nothing for, downtown LA, whatever. But there's no like visceral opposition to it because it's different. I think this alone is a wildly big evolution in the military industrial complex. And the importance of them is, I mean, that is the driving force of this planet, whether we like it or not. That is the hegemon. The fact that we're detached, it's just bills and money instead of sending over US troops. I think this is a massive change in the Overton window, in that if there are no people involved, a lot of us just kind of look the other way. And I think they're probably looking at this and going like, hey man, like it's the military industrial complex is evolving like an organism. It's going, no. The way to go is to just fund things, to just send over weapons. And in turn, I would imagine we're getting a lot of invaluable R&D from it, from Palantir, from whatever thing they're cooking up in DARPA that's looking at battlefields and changing and how it's different, and how like a cheap drone with a grenade on it and a GoPro is now more valuable than a whole, thing of indirect artillery fire. They're probably getting more bang for their buck than we realize, right? There's probably someone high up in some special access program and they're going, yeah, this isn't $100 billion to Ukraine. This is $100 billion that we're getting $1 trillion worth of R&D from, right? Instead of testing it out in Nevada, shooting dummies, we have real people running around. Never mind the fact that that's somebody's son, but I think that's what's going on. And I'm thinking now, when you're talking about Palantir, there's an idea I was playing with, I think last year, where I think you might have, and this is entirely speculation, I think you might have a class of elite somewhere that are almost Kurzweil-esque, where they see that we're on the verge of a singularity somewhere, but they're not sure if they're going to make it. I kind of have this idea that mRNA was rolled out not as depopulation, not as whatever, but it was just the biggest R&D program ever. Do it on every race, do it on male and female, young and old, from 5-month-old babies to 90-year-old women from Sierra Leone, and see what happens. They're trying to see, how does this thing work? Because mRNA, despite all of its drawbacks, it probably still is the future. I think they were just
even if it wasn't some sort of elaborate conspiracy that was the primary driver, in effect, that's exactly what happened.
Oh yeah, regardless, that was a good point.
Being a planetary clinical trial of various forms of mRNA, and also the what is it, the adenovirus, J&J, all these different company, one has to ask. I really do wonder if they aren't keeping better and more honest statistics than they're presenting to us. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
one would
no, someone's
assume they
got it.
are,
Someone's got it. Yeah.
but it wouldn't. You know, I don't ever discount stupidity and incompetence, and so that sometimes you know what we see is really dumb, but there's you know a guy back behind the scenes rubbing his hands and you know figuring out how it's to his advantage or calling all the shots. Perhaps that happens. I think in many ways, you know, that would be that guy rubbing his hands would be, say, Raytheon
Yeah.
in the run up to the Iraq War. But I don't think that necessarily negates the incompetence of the Bush administration.
Sure.
So, in the same sense, like when you look at Fauci, you look at Walensky, you look at the way in which the NIH and the CDC responded in this very incoherent way. They seemed very, very unprepared. They didn't seem like people primed with a narrative that they were ready to roll with. Even if you look at Event 21, you know, or Event 201, I'm sorry, and you know, Event 201, if it really was as impactful as many people say, I mean, some people would like to say that Event 201 represented clear evidence that they had not only full knowledge that the pandemic was coming, but they were in fact behind it. That this
Yeah.
was just their tabletop for a grand plan. Well, okay, let's just say that that's true. That wouldn't make any sense to post your highlights reel on YouTube the next day from your site, but you know, whatever. Let's say that that's actually what happened, and they were dumb enough to do it all out in the open. They were also dumb enough to not get their story straight. They didn't really go by a lot of the things that they talked about during Event 201. You know, just one example, they didn't shut the internet off to stop misinformation, which was one of the suggested responses. And also, even as you know, you just look at the everything from whether or not masks are effective to whether or not the vaccines are going to be safe. I mean, when Trump was in office, as you saw, so many people were saying that we can't trust that these vaccines are safe because, you know, of course, Trump would get credit for it. And then once it was kind of in Biden's
Yeah.
court, it was suddenly you have to take it or
Yeah.
you're killing everybody. So I guess what I'm getting at is whoever these evil controllers are, they need to get their people under control before they get us under control because their people are fucking idiots.
Yeah. No, yeah,
Um,
yeah. No.
but
They're in their own. Sorry, go on.
but there's enough intelligent ones. There's enough people that are they see this chaotic system run by you know half morons, half bureaucrats who are just running on inertia, and actually quite a few competent, intelligent people who can be put to good use. That's not to say there aren't really, really brilliant people, and it's definitely not to say there aren't really brilliant people who are fairly malevolent as well. But I do think that in the end, the kind of unified stories, and this is kind of, I apologize for departing from your original
No, who
point.
cares? Go for it. I don't care.
But there's something that's always kind of, I found that whether it's in regard to say the singularity and transhumanism, or whether it's in regard to power structures who are now making the decisions that are affecting our lives so much, there's this tendency to attribute like tremendous intelligence and tremendous power to them. And that some many people, for instance, who believe that they already have artificial general intelligence hidden away, super intelligence hidden away, or that it's definitely coming, and so there's nothing you can do about it. Um, it accepts the premises of people who I don't think are worth taking. There's no fundamental reason to take every one of their proclamations at face value. Even looking at beyond, like you look beyond Kurzweil to other transhumanists, other technocrats, and in the full post-human visions of what the future will look like, or even some of the more moderate, like optimalism sorts of viewpoints, just to optimize the human being. You look at all these different gradations of how impactful these technologies are supposed to be, and you look at all the differences, the different trajectories of like where these technologies are leading us. The AI will kill everybody. The AI will kill half of the people, but then absorb the other half. The AI will float off to the moon and then eventually Alpha Centauri because it's bored of human beings. The AI will do this, do that. None of them are coherent within themselves. And you look back at the the history of futurism or the attempts to project the future, they're never 100% accurate. It's just always little bits and pieces that may not even be able to be predicted from the first principles. So, I'll fall back on my earlier ambiguity. I think these people need to be taken very seriously because they're very intelligent. They understand how the technology works, and they are going to be right about a lot of things. But I don't think that any one of their visions is going to be 100% right. And even if you take the average of all of them, I think there's going to be a lot that's unaccounted for.
Yeah. No, no, a lot of them are fucking retarded, but they're not always incorrect, right? And
Yeah,
when you said sorry for departing, dude, I don't care. We can go whichever. That's what makes this the most fun is when it just goes
fair
crazy.
enough.
It goes off the rails. Those are the best podcasts. So like, I think I always point to this, and I've brought it up on this podcast a million times. So a lot of people are rolling their eyes, and so whatever, shut up. But it was this popular mechanics article, and I think the year 1900, and it was what would the year 2000 look like? They had like 10 predictions, and it's all like watercolor. Remember, this is 14 years before World War One. It's all like watercolor and shit, and it's funny when you first look at it. It's like skyscrapers were just getting started there in like Chicago, so it's like, I just imagine in the old timey voice, it's like in the future, like firefighters will, and it shows them they have these weird steampunk leather wings, and they're like floating up a 10-story skyscraper, and it's like they'll fly and put out fires, and you're like, the fuck? And then it's like it shows like the nuclear family like kissing the wife and kids goodbye, and this guy gets in like his hot air balloon. And he's in a suburban neighborhood, and like everyone's taking off in hot air balloons. And it's like, in the future, you'll have your own hot air balloon. You're like, dude, and then it's another thing is you have these little like I don't know, like displays, almost like a primitive screen, and it's got a long metal tube. And so essentially, if you and I were talking, we'd have like whatever, I don't even know. I'm in New England. We'd have like 100-mile, 1,000-mile tube, and we be talking to each other. He can bring it to the park, and it's just like whatever. But and all these things in the future, students will wear a metal helmet with a wire going to a central like wood chipper, and the teacher will just drop books in it, and it's laughable. But then you start to go back and look at it and you go, how they thought it would unfold is comically incorrect. The core idea occurred exactly. Number one,
Yeah,
firefighters with wings. Is that not a 747 fighting something from the air? Number two,
sure.
hot air balloon. Do we all have hot air balloons? Absolutely not. Do we all have our own transportation? Yes. Well, what about air transportation? We all the average man has access to flight. What about what about tubes? Well, that's FaceTiming. That's Zoom. Or what are we doing right now? And then the central shredding unit, is that not the internet? So how they thought it would happen is funny. What they thought would happen, no one can tell me that they were wrong. Now, granted, who knows? Maybe that was just a lucky shot, but that was 100 years ago. So whatever we think is coming in 100 years, we're probably laughably incorrect. What
You know,
is going to happen probably will.
those general principles that you're talking about, though, I mean, in one sense, you could say that they're obvious, right? So in the future, there will be better communications. In the future, there'll be more effective transportation. In the future, there'll be more effective ways to deal with disasters. With leather bat wings, Icarus wings. I think that the general principles hold, and sometimes more specific predictions. As you were talking about this, and by the way, that has got to be like one of the most excellent illustrations of futurists gone wrong. Maybe as laughably bad as say H.G. Wells in some of his stuff with the time
Yeah.
machine. Although the
Yeah.
Eloi and the Morlocks, it's looking more and more realistic as time goes on. But the talking about this, I was thinking about Tesla. Tesla is oftentimes held up as one of the more keen observers of the future, right? Like he saw the present trends, projected them into the future. And many people, in the more conspiratorial realm, believe that his ideas, his designs, his inventions that never really came to materialize, say the ray gun or something
Mm-hmm.
like that he'd come up with, or wireless power, that he actually had developed it, and the government they're sitting on it,
Yeah.
I guess alongside the UFO technology. and then they're just slow dripping it and using it to, I guess, control our minds. All of that I think is wonderfully creative and imaginative, and I'm glad that people are imagining those possibilities. But what really struck me, there was an interview in Collier's Weekly. I believe it was published in 1926, was with Tesla. And he's talking about the famous part of it. Is striking enough. The famous part, he talks about how wireless communication will be the future. And in the future, you will have small devices which you can communicate with another person across the planet. It will be small enough to fit in your vest pocket. And so obviously he was talking about cell phones. He was talking about smartphones. He didn't call it that. He didn't know that. But he knew technology would improve so that communication would be better. You can communicate across distances even without wires. And he then went on to say that what will happen is that the globe will become a sort of planetary brain that humans, he didn't elaborate on this, later thinkers would, but that basically each human would be something like a neuron, and that these wireless connections would be something like axons and dendrites, and that the planet itself would become this sort of super organismic brain. And that's, to me, I mean, anyone who cherishes freedom and individuality is maybe made a bit nervous at the idea of becoming a neuron in what Elon Musk would call a cybernetic superintelligence, as he calls Twitter. I don't really care for the image, but even worse, and I detailed this in my book, even worse, he also predicts that this state of affairs will allow women to become more and more effective in the economy, better and better workers, and that most women will lose their maternal instinct due to that ambition and due to that transformation in lifestyle. And that basically the human being will resort to something like the social structure. I think he called it the perfect arrangement or something to that effect of the bee. So that you have queens who, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
reproduce, and the rest are, reduced to workers. And so this idea of humanity becoming a eusocial organism like bees or ants or termites, and living in hives and becoming, in essence, a hive mind, and women becoming more like men, and I guess, de facto men becoming more like women, so that we're, in a they them hive mind. It may be a little outlandish, but I do think that the general structure has undoubtedly come to pass. That is something like what we live in now. And if you keep projecting it forward, if you have artificial cognition will improve, whether it's through brain emulation or very artificial neural networks or other algorithmic elements. If you end up in a society in which robots do in fact function better than humans at certain jobs or many jobs or most jobs, whatever path that goes on, we know that the general principles, we want to automate, and we're going to throw as much money as possible at it. We don't care who's replaced. We want superhuman artificial intelligence. We're going to throw as much money at it as we have. We don't really care ultimately if it poses an existential risk to humanity, so on and so forth. Genetic engineering, space exploration, gardening, whatever it may be, we know that those forces are active. So whatever the actual shape of the future is, barring a disaster, or really even disasters are probably going to come, barring a disaster that cannot be recovered from, something like a singularity is upon us, something like the Kurzweilian view or Ben Goertzel's view or Martin Rothblatt's view or Larry Page's view or Elon Musk's view, something like those is going to come to pass, even if it's half-assed. It's happening. It's really, I think, Tommy, the one thing that's great about having conversations, I would much rather be sitting with you and maybe having a beer than doing it the
Yeah.
cyborg method. If people could see what I'm seeing right now with my
Yeah.
screen and all this shit around me, it's just
Yeah.
so unnatural, so fucked
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But I do think that these conversations are really, really important, because it's like, you've obviously been thinking about this forever, and there aren't that many people, but there are a lot who have. And because we do face a future that is so uncertain, but certain elements are very, very likely, the more positions, the more ideas, the more approaches that we have, to fall back on maybe an evolutionary point of view, the more diversity there is in the gene pool, the more likely one is going to make it. And I think that even I know that you're in many ways spitballing in some sense, as far as like the singularity is coming, and we will have to adapt to it, or maybe you meant that as like a heartfelt declaration, even let's just say that you were just unswerving, let's say I could not convince you otherwise.
Sure.
I think it's really important that there are people on the right who think that way, because it doesn't, because one person goes down that path, because thousands do, doesn't mean that everybody does. Just like if I disappear into the cave, doesn't mean everybody has to follow me.
Sure.
But I do think that getting a really good map of where we're at now is really, really important. And also having a pretty good map of the mental worlds that these people have created. As we move into this wilderness, we're going to need all of those.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's the in person will always trump Zoom meetings, but working with what I have, unfortunately, I'm not Joe Rogan. I can't tell people to like come, hey, take 2 days off, come fly to my studio. So
Next time I'm in New England.
all right, yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, yeah, the end goal would be to have do it in person because it is so much better. And it is, yeah, it is looking at a screen surrounded by lights and shit. But it's also what we have
What we have.
in terms of going down all these different paths. Yeah, I'm not married to any of them. I don't. I'm kind of, that's one thing this podcast has done is kind of, I've been proved wrong so many times and had like experts kind of tell me professionally you're an idiot so many times, and had that kind of ego gut punch so many times that it has resulted in evolution to where when I glom onto ideas, I don't do what I've always done and you attach your ego to it. Or if someone says you're wrong, they're not attacking you, Tommy. But it's very hard to see that, right? You got it wrong. Well, fuck you. I'm not a bad person. It's like, I didn't say you were. I just said you got the math problem wrong. Like, it's nothing personal, right? It's that.
Right.
And so with that, it's allowed me to kind of detach more, not in an apathetic way, but just lean back and look at it and be like, some people are going to go to the cave. Some people are going to dive in and try to become silicon gods. And the rest of it's going to be somewhere the rest of it's going to be people that people have, they're going to do what people have always done. They're just searching for the easiest way to get from sunrise to sunset. How cool, does the robot do my laundry? All right, cool. Does it deliver pizza? All right, cool. The future of phones, the government's going to surveil you. A lot of people are just using it to order hamburgers. So like, there's also that sort of lowest common denominator, where a lot of people are just going to do whatever the simplest thing is. And I mean, something's going to come of, yeah, barring an asteroid, barring a solar flare, an EMP, something's going to come of it. And it does feel like we're coming to a crescendo. It does feel like culture is evolving even faster. And I think that's from technology evolving faster. I mean, 2023 compared to 2015, it's almost unrecognizable. That's 8 years. That's not, well, in the 60s, there were hippies. And then in the 80s, everyone was on Wall Street. This is 8 years. And it's gone
You know what? And
so
I
off
would
the
say,
rails.
there's some things not changing. Like if you were out in a national park, for instance, at least that's mostly the same, right? But it's not. You encounter another human, if they're not wearing some sort of strange crab-like mask, they're definitely wearing some kind of space gear that they bought at REI to take
Yeah.
out to the woods, and in everything, certain things, ancient structures in this world, to the extent they're not destroyed, yes, they are the same. And certain things, you go out to the park and you see people playing frisbee. The frisbees are about the same. The shorts are about the same. Young couples are about the same. It's all just as lovely, or if they've got a fucking stereo, it's just irritating. But yeah, the at the cutting edge, it's completely unrecognizable. And even in day-to-day life, the interactions you have with people, you can tell that the people who have become much more attached to their devices are much less responsive and able to really have a real conversation. And there were always those people before. There's just a lot more of them, and that's the reason. And then kind of day-to-day things that you took for granted, such as saying hi to that clerk, and maybe she's cute, or maybe he's wise and like always has some nuggets of wisdom for you, whatever. These sorts of things are being phased out in favor of, now you have to do the extra work of bagging your own groceries and checking yourself out, and so on and so forth. Like sometimes it's little things like that, sometimes it's really big things, like you go into Whole Foods and people are now scanning their palms, and if you take a look around, you can see that the entire place is blanketed with surveillance devices.
Yeah, fuck that.
Sometimes it's little things or big things, but yeah, it is whatever this civilizational transformation is at its essence. People really are going to have to make up their minds what they're going to pick from the menu,
Mm,
because if not, it's going to be made for them.
mm,
And that the people that you're talking about, the people on that path to least resistance, the cyborg is the human and the machine, or the animal, really, in the original definition, the animal and the sensory system and the machine merged together. And ideally, in their vision, it's a two-way control system, so that the input and the output are, if not equal, certainly beneficial to that organism to begin with. And I think that's what most of these transhumanists are going for. It's not like, not all of them, but most of them. They just want to have a machine that gives them advantages in life, and they want a machine that's in some sense loyal to them, so to speak, that they can fuse with. And maybe they'll get something like that. You know what? An airline pilot is a cyborg in a sense, and the airline pilot might be or maybe a small plane pilot who can just kind of go wherever. Definitely has harnessed technology in order to enact a will that couldn't be enacted without it. But the massive people, that two-way control system is very easy to be a one-way control system. And you see it with television, you saw it with radio, you see it in many ways with the newspapers and traditional media. And the internet has allowed for a lot more of a two-way control system sort of dynamic. But I mean, other than outside of a few outliers, I would say for the vast majority of people, the internet just ended up being a much more sophisticated one-way control system that allowed for just a little bit of input, and for the most part, just enough input so that the psychology of that individual or of the public at large could be more easily manipulated by that one-way control system. So I guess that's all to say that again, as we go into the future, whatever future it is you want, I think you're going to have to fight for it. I don't think that the future that they, and by they, a very wide variety of people with a wide variety of plans, but the various corporations and military institutions and governments here in the U.S. and abroad, they probably have radically different plans for your life than you do.
mm.
Hopefully, anyway. I
Yeah,
hope I hope I hope your listeners are planning for something better than what they want for us.
yeah, yeah. It is. I think, and I talked to Dr. Malone and Matthias Desmond about this one time, and it was like you have to realize that a lot of people don't want to be free, and that's a giant variable you have to factor in, right? I'm
Yeah.
screaming at a microphone in my bedroom, and I'm outcast to Rumble and BitChute, and I'm like, they're gonna enact a central bank digital currency, and the mRNA is gonna kill you, and I'm like, how come no? I'm like, do you guys not see like the censorship? It starts with COVID. It starts with questioning the 2020 election. It starts with saying it's a lab leak. Blah 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 blah, and we're just accepting censor. And I'm like, how are these people so stupid? And then eventually it starts to dawn on you. Some of them are stupid, but a lot of them see exactly what you're seeing. They just don't care, right? It's me hanging out with a bunch of gay guys, and I'm like, do you not see how hot she is? What about her? She's so hot. And eventually they go, dude, I'm looking at the same girl as you. I like men. And you're like, we're not even. Oh, so it's not that you're blind. You see her too. Oh, you okay. Oh, that's a wild difference. I think that's something you realize is you see people, yeah, scanning their hand, and you're like, do you not see where this is? And I think you have some of them that, if you sat down with them, some of them are stupid. They'd be like, what do you mean? It's just easy. I'm like, okay, well, you're done for. But some people might just be like, yeah, I know. I like it. I like my cage. I like my pod. I'm eating the bug. I got central bank digital currency. I don't question the government. They're probably gonna, yeah, depopulate me. But until then, I got a good thing going. I'm good. I don't question the narrative. I vote blue no matter who. Climate change, whatever. They're just like, I don't give a shit. There are people that are looking and they're going, I know it's bad they're rounding up the Jews, but you know what, man? I got this Hugo Boss uniform. Hitler thinks I'm cool. Whatever. And those people suck, but they exist. Some people don't want to be saved. They're looking at us and they're going, will you stop ruining this? I'm trying to enjoy my dystopian future. I think that's
Yeah,
their
the
freedom.
human herd may be a lot of fun, but they're not very good wingmen, especially not
No,
in a fight.
no, no,
Uh,
no, no, they're walking off a cliff. But
and so you're right, it is what it is, and so it goes. The if you look through literature, especially post agricultural literature, there's always these masses that are hanging around. You've
yeah,
got the characters who are actually doing things, and then there's these masses, and sometimes they're rabble, and sometimes they're slaves, and sometimes they're soldiers. But those masses are always there, and I find it's oftentimes too easy to lump people into a group. Sometimes there are individuals you miss because it appears masses to be masses. But one thing COVID really drove home to me is how easily manipulated people are on a mass scale, and it was far, far worse than I thought it would be. It was very
yeah,
depressing. When it
that
all came
was,
down, I thought that so many more people would say, especially when the evidence was very clear, that at least the most ridiculous measures should have been done away with. But there are people who would rather see drug out of your home and thrown into prison than to give up their plexiglass barrier at the store. And it is what it is. They are with us. The morons will always be with us, and many of those morons, unfortunately, are actually very smart and very knowledgeable. They're made moronic by that herd instinct.
yeah,
So it goes. The wiliest characters oftentimes end up, a sticky end in an early death. So maybe there's some wisdom to that herd instinct that
yeah.
the wolves and the foxes don't understand. But
No, there's something there. Yeah, no, I'm fully aware that if my podcast gets too big, a Hellfire missile is going to go through my apartment. Maybe they'll Michael Hastings me. Maybe my car will. Maybe my little Civic will somehow go to 200 miles an hour and hit a tree. I'm aware of that. I'm cool with it though, because to me it all zooms out to this like philosophical, religious. I think we're here. I think we're here to learn something, and ultimately, it doesn't matter whether we're dropped in 2023 or 800 BC. I think we're here to this whole thing, not the universe, Big Bang. I mean, it. When you sit down and you meditate, or you just get quiet. What is this? There is something. You ever gone to sleep and woken up when your eyes are still closed? Maybe you're in a car in a plane, and all of a sudden
sure,
you're just conscious. Oh, here I am. What is this? I can't help but think this is just a super elaborate curriculum. We're here to we're thrown in this simulation. It's like let's see what you do. Let's see what you when you're faced with insurmountable odds, and there's evil, and there's cattle, and there's lemmings, and what do you do? I don't know what we're learning. I don't know who's grading us. Maybe we're grading ourselves. It something just seems these decisions are so just in your face. Do they not seem like complex tests? Like I took the MCAT to get into medical school, and it blew the doors off of every other test I had ever taken. It was just, I think somebody described it as a 12-foot tall dual dildo wielding fire breathing monster, and it is. You think organic chemistry is hard and physics is hard. You take the MCAT and you leave there, and it's like a walk of shame. You're like, I just got fucked in the ass, but it was a great test because it was like, what is your worth? And you don't feel quite certain about any of your answers. You're not like, okay, that one's definitely the answer's 4. Every answer you give, you're like, I no, I think it's not that I think it's this one. It's just that I know those are wrong. So like maybe we'll do that. And then you wait 30 days and you get your grade back and you go, all right, I guess I'm not an idiot. I feel like that's what this all is. I don't know what it's for. I don't know why we're doing it. Again, I don't know if we're grading ourselves. I don't know if we've done this before. I don't know if we've done this a trillion times before. Is this to become some higher being? Is this do you become an angel? Do you become some next level of, that special guardian angel that looks after people? Or do you descend? Do you become some demon trapped in a dimension of just hatred and lust and desire and yearning? I have no idea, but it feels like a very, very complex test where you're not even sure what to do. It's like Portal, the video game. I think it's Portal, where every level is just a test, and there's no like walk over here and press A. You're just like in a room, and there'll be like a circle, like a square, I don't know, like two ladders, and like a you don't know, like a banana, and you don't even know what the goal is. It's like go, and
Or
you're like,
maybe you'll have a handful of keys and a trash can and a lock on your door,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you'll you'll
it's,
you'll go
but
about your day.
you don't even know. But that's the thing is like you don't even. It's not even like start the play Ace Combat. It's all linear. It's like attack the targets, beat the bad guy. Oh, there's the new bad guy. It's not even that. It's more of a game where it's like you didn't even know you're in a game. It's like the ultimate test. It's like, did you complete the test? You're like, what test? Like we gave you the stuff. We gave you the microfiber glass. We gave you the thermos, and we gave you the blue pen. Like what? It's like you were supposed to start a podcast, and after 4 years, you're gonna talk to Joe Allen. That's the test. You'd be like, I didn't even know I was in a test. I thought I was just paying taxes and trying to fuck chicks. Like it might be the ultimate test. And to me, I don't. That's like my best guess at what this all is. So like merging with AI or not, or is it apathetic? Are you moral? Like if you finally realize some people don't want to be free, and I'm like, well, I did my best to try to warn them, so like I guess my conscience is clear. Like was that the test? Like I have no, I don't know. I really, I think it just comes. I think it kind of comes back to like do unto others as you want done to you. I don't know. That's like my best take on what this existence is.
So not to be an endless book shill here,
No, I don't care, dude.
but so the closing of my book, the last chapter is axial powers. It's you might say a bad pun, but you're familiar with the axial age, the period of time identified by Carl Jaspers just after the Second World War.
No.
So the axial age, it's some have quibbles with even the idea of it, but I think as a general paradigm, it's very sound. You have hunter gatherers roaming around for 2 million years, 40,000 years. You take your pick on the date. 6,000 years, whatever. You take your pick on that date. And then you have the rise of agriculture, and suddenly you have a very different kind of human civilization. It's hierarchical, and the labor is divided in ways that human labor has never been divided. And the production of material culture increases in ways that was just never possible before. And then you get what is called the axial age. Jaspers, others who also posited something like it. Lewis Mumford, the philosopher of technology historian and kind of all jack of all trades in many ways intellectually. Lewis Mumford also claimed to have independently identified it, but certainly wrote about it a great deal. So what is the axial age? The axial age is that period. We'll stick with the very generic framework and just ignore all the nuance. But as Jaspers identified it, it was the period between 800 BC and 200 BC in which you had the rise in the West, what he divided between the Orient and the Occident of Greek philosophy and the Hebrew tradition. And then in the kind of intermediary area, later scholars would really focus in on the rise of Zoroastrianism in Persia. And then in India and in China, you had the rise first of what we now call Hinduism or the Vedic tradition. And then coming out of that, Buddhism coexisting afterwards. And then, of course, in China, the rise of Confucius and Lao Tzu and the traditions around them, Confucianism and Taoism. And all of this happened by and large, these systems, Greek philosophy, Hebrew prophetic tradition, the ascetic traditions of India, the priestly traditions of Persia, the kind of sage culture in China, all of them happened in a historic framework all at once within a lot of ways to cut that slice that cat up, but I think I fucked that metaphor up. But anyway,
I
a
like
lot
that
of
more.
ways
I like that
slice that
more.
turkey or
No,
skin
fuck
that
no.
cat.
Let's cut up a cat. I like that more.
Whatever we do with it, the axial age would say that that's a barbaric practice, and I think that it is really quite astounding that you did have the appearance of all these novel intellectual and cultural structures in that time period. And these would crystallize into all the world religions that we now take for granted today. And up until the post Renaissance and really the onset of modernity were the overwhelmingly dominant ways of thinking and acting in the world. And so the idea of the axial age, right? This notion that there is this revolutionary period in which human society has been fundamentally transformed. And I think to me, it's inarguable. It did. You had the god king cultures of Sumer, Egypt, Babylon. You had the similar god king cultures of the Shang and the Zhou dynasties, and other Chinese dynasties. And then you had something a bit different, but at least it's similar in the sense, when you look at the Vedic tradition of India, and you look at the sort of warrior ethos and the close melding of the king with the idea of divinity. Out of all of these came this axial tradition, which took it no longer attributed holiness to the most powerful entity on earth, but attributed it to a moral order above the powers of the earth. No longer is Pharaoh the incarnation of Ra. Yahweh stands in judgment above all of it, even when the people of Yahweh lose. So you look at the stories of during the era of the Assyrian, really all the tragic Jewish stories, but especially the destruction of the northern kingdom by Assyria, and then the destruction of Judea and Jerusalem, and the temple by the Babylonians, and the subsequent captivity. That many would just simply, and I would argue maybe most or all, there's not a lot of evidence for alternatives. Most would, in that time period, would have just simply said, okay, these gods, Marduk is just simply more powerful, and we'll submit. But the Hebrew response was very different. The Hebrew response was to self-reflect and to consider how they had gone wrong, and that was enshrined in the prophetic tradition and the works of the Bible. And no longer was one's material power a sign of the quality of one's soul or the quality of one's alignment with the highest power, with God. It no longer was it the material state, the success of the kingdom, of the empire. What determined the good graces of God is whether or not you would follow the commandments and you were in the good graces of God. Now, very, very different versions of that came up in the Greek philosophical tradition, and very, very different versions of it came up in the Vedic tradition and the post-Vedic traditions like Buddhism, so on and so forth on in China. But the commonalities, the general structures, sort of like the difference between a hot air balloon and a car. Both are forms of transportation, right? The commonalities of these systems that arose, and the predominance. I mean, they became the world religions, with the exception of the Greek tradition, which survives in science and philosophy. It survives in democracy or republics. So it's still, the seeds still kept growing afterwards. So this transitional period, I would say the defining general feature is that transcendent realm being added to the material realm. You now have a real sense. Yes, of course, there were heavens and hells. All of that preceded the axial age, but the nature of them was conceived of in radically different ways. So that you have this material realm, the realm of physical power, the realm of all of the striving and the suffering and the anguish, the successes, all of that. You have that, but there is another order that is in some way connected, but quite different. And that other order is superior, whether that be the heavens of Yahweh, or what Plato called the one, descend in the demiurge descending from, or the Brahman in the Hindu tradition, or Buddha nature and nirvana in the Buddhist tradition, or the Tao in the Lao Tzu's tradition, so on and so forth. All of them saw this transcendent realm, and all of them changed everything about how human society unfolded. Even if the key insights weren't incorporated 100%, which they obviously weren't, the hierarchy and violence of Egypt and the enslavement of Egypt continued on long after the axial age, and just simply took on axial trappings. A good example would be maybe the Roman Empire taking up the crucifix, this sign of self-sacrifice, and using it as an emblem of empire. But what I note in that final chapter, this is a long way around this little corner here. Sorry about that, Tommy. But
I don't care.
what I note, and I'm not alone in it. I simply flesh it out in my own way. But we are now in another similar period to the axial age. You could call it maybe a transhuman axial age, in which it's very different in that the transcendent realm is no longer something that's reached through prayer, meditation, philosophical reflection, various exercises and things like that, ascetic practices. It's no longer a realm that exists and can be contacted by simply divorcing oneself from attachment to the physical and changing one's focus to what is transcendent and what is beyond. Instead, it's a quest to create that transcendent realm by way of technology and to use that as a vehicle to go forward into the future, to fuse with it. So instead of trying to release oneself from egotistical attachments to find some sort of resonance with God or the One, or Brahman or Atman, whatever, instead of that, the quest is to create hyper intelligent artificial intelligence and use that as the vehicle into the future. And in the most extreme dreams, to create a godlike artificial intelligence that you fuse to through brain computer interfaces and that you will keep up with by way of biological alterations to your genome to make yourself more intelligent so that you live longer, so you can keep this little vessel as long as you need to before you finally upload. In those dream worlds, basically they're replicating or mirroring, or I would actually say inverting those previous axial insights and creating a very materialistic techno religion out of it. And not unlike when Moses came before Pharaoh and challenged or was challenged by the Pharaoh's court magicians. I always found it striking in that story that yes, Moses, it's natural to assume, of course, Moses throws down his staff and it becomes a serpent because God's on his side. But the court magicians could do it too, and their staves turned into serpents too. They weren't as strong as Moses's serpents, but nonetheless, in Silicon Valley, they're throwing down a lot of staves, and they are becoming serpents. It's very very real, and yet myself, to confess, I'm much more inclined towards the traditional viewpoint that really the moral order and the consciousness above this physical realm is what we owe our existence to, and that is the place that we should be directing our attention and really our souls.
I think that the moral order, the idea of God, the kind of above this, I believe in that, and I kind of look at it like we're playing a video game, right? You go play online some ranked match, get your ass kicked by somebody who's ranked 10,000, whatever. That's all well and good, and you can create an empire, and you can create guys in a clan, and they all have the same username tag, and they're all, they're dominant, and they can run the show, and they can fuck you in the ass, and they can take over the game. But eventually, you hit pause, and you turn off the TV, and you just go into your living room. I don't know, you got a dog, you got a girlfriend. To me, that's the ultimate reality. Everything there where it seems like they're just running the show, it ultimately is a lower dimension, outside of which is this dimension where I can go drive to the store and buy sushi and drink beer and get drunk and watch the sunset. That thing, although it's super real when you're playing it and the graphics are great, it's 4K, 60 FPS, and the audio's great, it's still just that. At a certain point, you just put it down. And all that empire is just right there. And it's nothing. And I think that's probably what the higher order is when this is all said and done. If the fucking demonic, pedophile elite take over more so and create a hyper intelligence and create hell on earth, and it's just makes the Nazi death camps look like a summer camp. Eventually we die, and I think it's probably like just turn off the game. You just walk away from it. And there's a God who was watching you and watched how you behaved in the game. And none of the game will matter. When I turn that off, we're just sitting here we're just sitting here in a room. Somebody could have been sitting there telling me they're gonna fucking kill me, and now I'm looking at them. I'm like, why'd you do that, man? Like, you don't have any of your power. You don't have your 10,000 rank. You don't have your gun and all your skins that you've downloaded. Why'd you do that? It's just you and me. Like, and I think that's probably what the highest order is. So ultimately, it's important how we act here, but none of this matters. It matters how we act. But this whole thing, I think we're in a game. I think we're in something to see how you act. You see like the Delta Force or Dev Gru like kill houses, and you're going through and shooting targets, and you always see there's like catwalks above it. And it's for the selection guys to watch you, to see how you perform. I think that's what we're in. Is like we're in some form of kill house. Did you just shoot everyone? Did you shoot the civilians? Did you only shoot the bad guys? Were you heroic? Did you take a plastic bullet for your buddy? How does it roll out? I think that's probably what it is. And it's such a good test because you don't even know it's a test. You don't know anyone's watching. It's not that you're alone in a police interrogation room and they just want to see what you do on your own. You don't even think you're being watched. It's the ultimate test because you don't even know you're being tested. I think that's probably what this is.
Well, I unfortunately I now have to transcend out of this frigid air conditioned bubble and transcend into the heat dome outside my door. It's wonderful weather here, as I'm sure you've heard. But
Yeah.
wonderful speaking with you, Tommy.
You too,
Yeah,
man.
I got to mosey,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. No, yeah. Well, no, yeah. I know. I went 20 minutes longer than I told you to keep you. Yeah. Let's wrap this one up, guys. Please go in the description. You can follow him on Twitter. You can go grab his book. Dude, I'd love to have you on again sometime. That was fun as fuck.
absolutely. I hope you're able to read the book. I
I
think that
will.
you of all people will understand where I came from. Whether you agree or disagree, you'll get it. And I'd
I'll
be
make a
very
note of it
curious
right
as
now.
to what you thought.
I'll make a note of it right now. I burn through about a book a week, so it's no problem. I'll make a note of it right now. Um, yeah, dude. I'll email you this. I'll grab the book, and I'd love to have you on again sometime, dude.
Right on, brother, man.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. This was a dope episode. Go grab the book. Go follow him on Twitter. Don't make me look like a fucking idiot. Give him something. He gave me an hour and a half of his time. Go give him a follow. That's all I ask of you. All right, dude. Thank you so much. Till next time, man.